let's say we take kind of political left and political right ideology. There's a gazillion examples, and what we call the political left and right today might seem actually quite different than what it was in the past. So let's take a kind of what had previous to recently been kind of some essential ideas in Republican or Democrat platforms. So we kind of have this Republican right-oriented idea of wanting to empower the self-responsibility and sovereignty of the individual, and more individualistic. And so smaller government, less social services, more empowering of those who are entrepreneuring and pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and that kind of thing. And then you have the kind of more democratic left perspective that says, well, and here it's saying the collective is actually created by the individuals. So we want to empower the individuals that are creative and take agency, because better individuals make a better whole. That's kind of the gist. Over here, it's like, well, but the individuals are being conditioned by the environment that they're born into, by the whole. And so even though I can find that one story of that one guy who pulled themselves up by the bootstraps in the ghetto, there's a whole lot more people that succeeded who were born into the Hamptons than born into South Central. And so let's create better environments that actually condition better people, because there's top-down effects. The wholes affecting the individuals. So there's for many people some seemingly compelling truth in both of these, and also problems, right? So there can be a right-oriented perspective that says, hey, look, if we set up social services and welfare and whatever, we actually condition shittier people who are less strong and resilient in the face of the environment. We de-incentivize those who are most entrepreneuring and creative, and we make people who are doing badly still do well. And that actually kind of down-regulates the evolutionary pressure in the whole system. Why would we want to do that? And of course, over here, we can have a kind of left perspective that says, yeah, but some people are getting ahead using shared services that the government pays for from everybody's tax money that they aren't actually really accounting for, and they're affecting the commons negatively in a way that is externalizing the cost to everyone else, so that they're being claimed to be more entrepreneurial. It just means they're extracting from the commons and externalizing cost to the commons better. And do we really want to let people die on the footsteps of hospitals because they don't have money or insurance, in a fully individualistic libertarian kind of idea? And fully libertarian kind of ideology can't solve multipolar traps. And so, but there's clearly truth in both of these, and they are clearly neither complex enough to actually handle reality, in which there are bottom-up effects where the individuals affect the whole, and there's also top-down effects where the wholes in turn affect the individual, and there's feedback and feed-forward loops, and neither of them are factoring those enough. But the debate process doesn't bring about dialectic, right? The debate process is here, actually make the idea more polarized to get people on this side, emphasize rhetoric over real sense-making, and emphasize winning over collectively trying to make sense together. So the debate process is not a good sense-making process. It's a narrative warfare process. Dialectic is different, where it says, okay, I think we have some truth and not all of it. I think you have some. Let's endeavor together earnestly to figure out the things that we're all interested in figuring out. And then we start to say, okay, well, do we want better individuals who are more sovereign, independent of environment? Duh. Nobody doesn't want that. Or do we want wholes that support all the individuals within them to do better? Well, duh, we want that. So, but the way that we've done social services makes, oftentimes, some of them, makes the people not more sovereign, but more dependent. So it's actually not making better people, it's making more comfortable, but shittier people, right? And the way that we incent individuals over here incents people who are entrepreneuring, but by externalizing costs to the commons and creating radical wealth inequality. So it's not incentivizing the most truly creative and intelligent and good people, it's incentivizing effective sociopathy and things like that. So neither of these are doing all that good at the thing they're even claiming to do. So how do we create social services, collective processes that condition healthier people who are more sovereign? How do we create environments that condition people who do better in any environment? Right, that actually condition strength and resilience and sovereignty in the individuals, who then in turn affect the environments in ways that support the increased sovereignty of everybody else. And that's a totally higher order way of starting to think about the relationship between them that starts to recognize the inexorable failing of both of those perspectives, and that what the approach would take is more complex, right? That's an example of starting to move towards synthesis from a thesis and an antithesis, right? And if you look at even personal things in your life, you're wrestling with like, okay, do I want to accept and love reality and people and myself as I am, or do I want to like help strive to make things better? There's similar, like those types of things. You'll find thesis, antithesis everywhere, where the actual insight to synthesis is novel insight not contained in either of those. When I say accept you as you are right now, or help work to change you to make you better, and I see those as different, it's because I'm seeing you as a noun. Right? I'm seeing you as a fixed thing, or accept you are this current state. Whereas if I see you as a process, if I see you as a verb, I see you as a becoming that is different than you were yesterday and different than you were when you were 2, right? Then accepting you as you are includes dynamism, includes the impulse to change, grow, and evolve, so I can accept you fully as you are, and love you as you are, which includes accepting and loving the impulse to grow and expand and include and transcend, so I can support you to become more, not on the basis of judging you as insufficient, but loving you completely, including loving the evolutionary trajectory inside of you, right? But that insight of you as a verb rather than as a noun was actually not captured in either of these. So the dialectic process of saying, like, okay, well, how do I see the partial truth here? Construct this fully. And then how do I see the partial truth here? Construct this fully. And then what new insights bring these together in a higher order perspective that is more complex and more nuanced than either of them? So that's kind of a dialectic process. And it might not just be 2, thesis, antithesis, it might be lots of perspectives. This is a tool this is a process that I would love to see people start practicing at for sense making, of whenever they're talking with someone, start by seeking to understand before seeking to be understood, and seek for the truth value in what people are saying, not just the wrongness. But then don't holistically throw out what they're saying as totally wrong or totally true. Be able to separate that there is signal and noise. And then be able to say, if I see signal from a number of sources, how does that fit together into higher order perspective? This is another sense-making process.
You mentioned emotion and vulnerability as key components of sense-making. That may seem a little bit counterintuitive to people. Can you explain what you mean by that?
If I want to make sense of the world well, I'm going to engage in some communication processes with other people to make sense of the world, some collective sense-making, then I want them to share true information with me, to not disinform nor withhold. So how do I create the trust and psychological safety for them to do that? Well, I'm probably going to have to do that too. And so how do we create mutual trust and psychological safety that we're not going to use the information that we're sharing with each other in game theoretic ways with each other? That's a huge part. And if people don't have some spaces and some relationships where they feel like they can actually share fully, openly, honestly, and feel trust in that, their sense-making is going to be radically curtailed, right, to what they can just do on their own, and without anybody's ability to help error correct them with full sharing. Also, one of the sources of bias is identifying with what I believe, because I'm identifying with part of an in-group that believes that thing, or because I am special or smart or right or whatever for believing that thing. So the impulse to be right means that I won't seek to understand other perspectives. And so if I'm going to actually seek to understand the truth value in other perspectives, like earnestly try and get what they are seeing, where they're coming from, I have to stop seeing it the way that I'm seeing it for a little while. And I also have to completely suspend debate and narrative warfare and the impulse to be right and all of that. And so there is a deeper human connection that's involved. There's also there's a psychological process that almost seems like a spiritual process where, for me to really try and get where you're coming from on a topic, I have to really take your perspective. Well, what is it in me that is taking your perspective? Because it's not my perspective, right? It is actually having to drop the way that I see things to really try and see it the way that you see things, to make sense of it. So that means that there's a capacity in me that can witness my perspective, that can also witness your perspective. But it is deeper than the current perspective I have. And we all know we can change our beliefs, and there's still something that is us. So there is a usness that is deeper than the belief system. To be able to really try to make sense of someone else, I actually have to move into that level of self that is deeper than belief systems.